This is Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. Inspiring and providing real insight to our listeners with every story. Exploring deep stories behind every guest. Please welcome your host, Bo Tiffany.
Thanks for joining us again today for another episode of Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. My special guest today is Scott LaBonte. Scott started the Sheboygan area Pay It Forward group, and within 2 months he's made an impact on our community, gotten some local attention, as well as about 1,700 plus members within about 2 months period. He is a man with a mission and a man with a story, and we get the opportunity to explore that with him today. So it's with a sincere heart that I welcome to my show. And with that said, hey Scott, how you doing today? Thanks for coming on Digital Voices.
Oh, thanks for having me. How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's my pleasure. You know, I was really excited when I saw the Facebook initiative group that you put together and how much the community has gathered behind it. And I wanted to help air your story and also kind of get your backstory, find out where you're from, what your roots are, and kind of what got you into the position that you're in now, and also what the future looks like for you. So with that said, let's start in the beginning. Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from the UP of Michigan, about 5 hours north of Sheboygan here. A small town actually called Calumet, Michigan. Approximately about 7,000 people-ish.
Okay.
Kind of small, kind of tight-knit place.
Sure. And big family, small family? What's that structure like for you?
Relatively small. I have a brother and a sister.
Okay.
Older brother, younger sister.
What'd your family do? What's your mom and dad from?
My dad worked at a dairy pretty much his entire life, right from out of high school, right on up to pretty much till he retired. My mom was mainly a stay-at-home mom. She had a couple jobs here and there that I can remember as I was growing up, but nothing major until we got a little bit older, and then she set out into the workforce.
Okay. Did that mean that you grew up on a farm then, or you grew up in the city and Dad just went out to the farm to work?
Kind of wasn't really. There's not really a whole lot of farming area up there. There's a few, but not a whole lot.
Okay.
So I was right in town.
Gotcha. Was it a dairy farm your dad worked on, or what kind of farm?
It was dairy.
Okay. Hard worker then. Yeah. Probably gone early in the morning and probably didn't get back till late at night, huh?
Many, many long hours, many long days.
Yeah. That showed you some structure and dedication and some work ethic. Those are some of the things that you grew up with underneath Dad. What's Mom
Absolutely.
like?
I think Mom's kind of quiet, kind of more of an introvert type. Never really said a whole lot, kind of like to stay in the shadows.
Okay.
And worked behind the scenes, made sure everything was running smoothly.
Nice. And what kind of stuff do you do with the family when you're young? Do you guys do family get-togethers? Is that a big priority for your family? Family time?
Family was always huge. Family was always a very big thing. We always, every holiday, every chance we could get was always spent at my grandparents' house for big meals and get-togethers, and it was the entire family, you know, and huge. Once we got the whole crew together, there was a lot of us.
Well, that's nice. It gives you kind of a sense of community, a sense of family, especially when you have one that big.
Right.
That's really important. I think that kind of shows in some of the stuff that you're doing currently, but we'll get to that. So tell me about your interest in school. What kind of stuff were you interested in when you were young?
Well, that's what kind of takes a weird twist. In school, I was not interested at all. I had no want, need, nor desire to be there. I was, in fact, kicked out of school at one point for missing too many days, for skipping, and deciding that I had better places to be, although really I didn't have any place that I needed to be, but I thought I did. So I was thrown out at one point. They, inevitably let me back in.
Was it because you're a rebel, or was it just not interesting? It didn't captivate you?
I think a combination of both. I was the, I guess if you want to kind of stereotype me, I was the long hair, earring, leather jacket, boots. I was one of those kids.
Okay. When were you born, just so we have a time frame, in what decade were you going to school?
1971.
Okay, so you're going through the school in 80, right? In the 80s?
Yes.
Okay, that kind of gives me a visual, hopefully our listeners too. So,
yeah, I was an 80s kid.
Nice.
And it kind of shows.
Yeah, for sure. And you kind of got a musical interest at some point, and I know that started early. So tell us about that. What really sparked that creativity side of you?
Well, the music part, it's one of those I didn't, I guess as odd as it sounds, I didn't really know that I had a choice to become a musician or not. It's kind of something that's always been there. My mom nor my dad, neither one of them are at all musically inclined, and they didn't hesitate to say that. My dad always joked he couldn't carry a tune in a bucket if he tried. But it was one of those things. In Michigan, when you hit 14 years old, that's when you're allowed to go deer hunting, and that's a huge thing in that area. Everybody deer hunts. Everybody, you spend time at the camp with everybody, and it's this whole big gathering. And when I hit 14 for Christmas, I had asked my dad, he was going to buy me a deer rifle so I could start the whole tradition, the whole process. And I told him, I said, Dad, I really want a guitar. And this, I don't want to say set him off a little bit, but it did kind of. I think he backpedaled a little bit, and he was like, kind of unexpected. And he had thought, he had told me, he said, the thing's just going to sit in the corner. You're never going to touch it. You're never going to do anything. So I feel like I'm going to be wasting my money on this, and I would rather get you a deer rifle. And I pressed a little bit more, and I'm like, Dad, I'd really like to get a guitar. And so he broke down in Christmas. I opened up my very first guitar, kind of like the old Waylon Jennings tune. It was
electric or acoustic?
It was an electric.
Nice. Did you get an amp with it then too, or was it just the guitar?
Just the guitar at that point. It was an older Fender Strat.
Okay.
And that was my first.
Nice. Especially a vintage Strat, that had to have been kind of exciting for you. Did you know what you were getting at that point, or did you just appreciate it later on? Oh, Dad was good to you.
And I wish I hung on to it.
Right. It's unfortunate you don't have that anymore. So you took to it. You obviously put a lot of heart, sweat, and hours on your axe. Tell us about that. What was some of the first stuff you started getting into?
I think probably like most people, probably one of the first things I started playing was Smoke on the Water.
Okay.
It was, the easy, repetitive riff that just, is kind of stuck in everybody's head. And I think that was probably the first. That, and I think it was Scorpions' Rock You Like a Hurricane were two of the songs that I think were first to come out.
Nice.
And, it was one of those, once I picked it up, it was kind of an extension of myself. It just felt good. It felt like it needed to be there.
Yeah.
And by no means, I'm not a phenomenal guitar player by any means. I'm a basic player, but I'm solid and I'm comfortable with that. And, I'm okay where I'm at as a player.
Mm-hmm.
And, I started in bands pretty much from the time I was, I think, 17 years old, we started bands. And we started playing, and we were out in the bars and packing bars. We would go there, and the bar is already packed, knowing that it's our band that's playing. And that is an unbelievable feeling that, you walk in and everybody is just waiting for you to start. And you walk down the street, and there's people hanging out of their cars and honking their horns and yelling, because they recognize you from the band. And it's just this really cool thing.
Yeah.
And it just builds that musician mindset, I think.
I feel like I skipped a part. When you first started learning, like you're playing by yourself, and then you started maybe finding some friends to play with. How did you get into this band, and how much time and dedication did it take you before you got good enough to actually play, live like you're just describing?
Well, I started at 40 by the time I was 60. Once I picked up the guitar, it was kind of a, like I had mentioned, it was kind of an extension of myself. I don't think I ever really put it down. Well, most kids were out partying and hanging out and probably causing trouble and whatnot. I wasn't home playing my guitar because that's what I felt like I needed to do. If that makes any kind of sense.
No, absolutely. Some people are driven to be artists. Some people are driven to be doctors. We all have our niche, and I think this obviously was yours. So that kind of developed. You got into a circle of friends, or you found people that you could play with that you then formed a band with, and you started playing out. And how old were you when you started that?
I think the first time I played out publicly, I think I was 17 years old. We did, of all things, we did a sobriety dance. And that kind of really, once you get up on stage and you get that feeling and you get the people that are, clapping and cheering, I tell you, there's really not a whole lot of better feeling out there.
Yeah. Were your bandmates your age, or was it a variety of ages?
Nope, they were all my age.
Nice.
We all started pretty young. And we, started out with a few decent players and a few not so decent. We weeded through as we went and replaced the ones, the weakest links, and replaced them with people that were a little bit stronger and better, or little different parts. And it grew quickly. And we realized quickly then at that point that we had something because we all clicked so well.
Right.
And we realized that by having this, we could share this. We could do something with this. We could get out. We could play, and we could, people are actually going to hopefully come listen to us.
Right. So who were the originals that started this then? Obviously, you're one of them as you're weeding through trying to find the right people. Was it your band, or was it you and a buddy that kind of got this formed? How'd that work for you?
It was actually me and my older brother that got it together. We both played guitar.
Oh, okay.
And so we started kind of reaching out to different people that we knew dabbled a little bit in with instruments. And, that's when we would hold actual, almost like, I don't want to say auditions per se, but kind of get them in, try them out, see if they fit. A big part of that is, not only the musicianship of it, but the being able to click as a group. You need that compatibility aspect of it to make it successful.
Right. So your brother, who got the guitar first, you or him?
We both did. Christmases that year, we both got guitars.
Oh, okay.
He was 16, I was 14.
Nice. So you kind of got to play with each other since day one, which is really nice. Who's the better guitar player, if I can ask?
He is, by far.
Nice.
I went the more, like the rhythm aspect of it. He went more of the leads and, the screaming guitar and stuff like that. So it actually worked out very nicely because we filled the needs nicely in the group.
Right, and complemented each other. Absolutely, that's great.
And being that we grew up playing with each other like that, there was kind of like an unspoken, I always knew where he was going to go and he always knew where I was.
Yeah. I feel like there's this underlying support between your family is structured that way so that it's very supportive of one another. And I think Dad went a long way to trade up the deer rifle for two electric guitars. Or did you have one electric and one acoustic?
No, I didn't actually get an acoustic until, I was in my mid-20s. I bought a house and there was an acoustic guitar in the closet. And that was the first acoustic that I ever picked up.
Nice. Nice vintage one, or what'd you get?
It was kind of an old beat-up thing, probably like a Harmony or a Stella or whatever it was.
Sure.
Strings were way high off the fretboard, and it played pretty rough, but it sounded all right, so I kept plugging away at it.
Well, if you don't have an amp, an electric guitar doesn't sound all that great.
No, it's kind of quiet and hard to hear.
Yeah, for sure. So your passion for playing really kind of propelled you. Obviously, that started when you're just getting out of high school. Did you graduate? I know that school was rough. They kicked you out a couple times, but you did end up graduating, correct?
I did. Actually, in a class of 43, I graduated number 42. I graduated with a 1.4 grade point average. The only person that was below me in the class actually did not graduate. And so I was pretty much bottom of my class, but I did do it.
Oh, there's only up from there, right?
Right? I always had the mindset D for diploma. That's all I cared about.
Yeah. So you got out. I'm sure you didn't go into college right away. You just kind of pursued the passion for playing. Tell us about that. What were the early years like as you got to get on your own and become your own person?
Well, when I graduated high school, it was one of those. I was the type of kid, like I had mentioned, I had the long hair, the earrings, the leather jacket. I was kind of the outcast. I was probably voted the least likely to get married in my class, and in all reality, I was probably the first to get married in my class. I was married at 19 years old, had 2 kids by 21.
Oh, quick!
That kind of put the damper on the music scene.
Yeah. So how did that work for you? You went from being the rocker to home dad. Obviously, maybe you took some time off from playing. How did that work?
I did. I when my kids were little, things were kind of tough. I was working delivery at a furniture store during the day, and I would work part-time in the evenings at a local gas station convenience store. Well, my wife at the time would stay home with the kids. We had thought, at that time that was the best place for her to be, raise the kids and be there when she was needed and stuff. So I was working 2 jobs trying to support us.
Yeah.
Things got awful tight for a while. I sold every bit of equipment that I had for Christmas one year. And my kids needed Christmas, and funds were pretty tight, so I sold absolutely everything I had. I didn't play for 7 years. I didn't pick up a guitar. I didn't have any kind of equipment. I just I walked away from it for a while. Was
that hard for you? Or was it just instinctual, like family comes first and you didn't think twice?
It was hard, because that is such a huge part of me.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
At the same time, family is most important. Their needs came before anything that I guess that trivial things at that time.
No, and we can see that from talking with you and describing your earlier childhood and how that worked for you. It just makes sense that's the way that you are. So, you kind of gave up rocking for a while, had to work 2 jobs to support the family. The family grew. You ended up with 3 kids, right?
I did. Yep. Yeah, I had my first 2 by 21, and then there was an 8-year gap between those 2 and my last one.
Okay. So, what was life like? What were the priorities? What were the things that you were focused on and involved with at that time?
At that time, just trying to hopefully guide my kids to be the best people that they possibly could, to grow up to be successful and, kind of stay out of trouble. Because not that I was a troublemaker or I really had any kind of run-ins with the law, but I didn't want them to either.
Right. So what kind of stuff did you do as a dad? I mean, so obviously that's important. You're working 2 jobs. What did you do with the family when you had time off? How did you structure that?
We did a lot of camping, a lot of picnicking together, time wherever we could. We spent a lot of time at beaches and stuff. Because up in UP, pretty much wherever you go is water. You're
Sure.
up on a big peninsula up there, so 5 miles in any direction you're at a beach, which is really nice.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time at the beach. We spent a lot of time. We always had a camper. We always had things that we could do together as a family.
That's great. Did you go to church? Were you religious?
I was not. That is something I was when I was younger. I was actually an altar boy when I was growing up.
Oh, okay.
Forced to, basically, by my parents. My mother was very religious. My dad, not so much. And I think that kind of, being that I had to when I was growing up, once I got old enough, I kind of shied away from it a little bit.
Sure. So family and the dynamic and just raising your family were the priorities through your 20s, I would say, and probably into your early 30s. Then,
yes.
They got kind of old enough where you got a little bit more time, or did you end up climbing the ladder at your employment that allowed you to make more money and maybe cut back a little bit on hours? How did that work for you?
I ended up, I got hired at a grocery store shortly after, I'd worked the furniture store and the gas station. I traded that up for a grocery store, which ended up being the night manager. I ran a small night crew. We were in charge of restocking the store, I was in charge of ordering all of the products for the store, and I kind of worked my way up quickly there. So that helped. I was able to only work one job as opposed to two.
Sure.
And then from that, I got noticed doing that, and I ended up getting hired on at Shopco, and I got hired on as a manager, which then, income increased very much nicer.
Right. It gave you a little bit more cushion. And you didn't waste that opportunity. You ended up going back to school. What drove you to decide to go back into college, considering how high school was for you?
Well, it was one of those. I'd always wanted to go to school, but I never really knew what for. And I knew had I gone when I was younger, I would have wasted my time, money, whatever, any kind of resources that I could have used to help my family.
Sure.
So, after I worked at Shopco, I left there. Retail, the hours, the stress, everything. It was getting to be quite a bit for me. I left there and I started turning wrenches and working at Penske Auto Center. I did that for a couple of years. And then I had gone into work one day and we were told that morning that Penske Auto was closing its doors and shutting down immediately. It was going out of business. It was non-existent. At this point, I still have relatively young kids, and I was just told that when we go home today, you don't have a job. Panic sets in at that point. I'm thinking, I've spent my entire life trying to do what I can to support my family and to, make sure that they're secure and safe. And I'm hit with this that, at 3:30 or 4 o'clock when you go home today, you don't have a job anymore.
Right.
And sheer panic at that point set in. And I went home and I sat down with my wife at that point. And it's actually because of her that I ended up going back to school, because she told me, she said, you always wanted to go to school. Well, now you don't have a job to stop you. Now is your time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
She said, why don't you enroll in school? And I was like, okay. So before I could change my mind, or before I could be talked out of it, or talk myself out of it rather, I went down to the local college and I signed up to start that fall.
Taking remedial classes? What kind of stuff do you start taking off the bat?
I jumped right in both feet. I jumped right into elementary education was my major.
Oh, that's
great.
And can I ask,
I started in the summer.
That's a unique one for, a 30-something guy. What pushed you into elementary ed? And not only that, but you have more of a niche than that too. It's special needs, which came later, but we'll get into that too.
I've always liked working with kids. I like watching them grow. I like watching them learn. I like, you hear teachers talk about the aha moments that these kids get.
Mm-hmm.
Those are amazing moments when you know that something you've done to reach that aha moment, when the light bulb turns on and it actually clicks and makes sense for them. That's what it's about. And I've always just had that passion for working with the kids. And there's so much fun. You never know what they're going to come up with.
Yeah, no kidding. I love that Cosby show, Kids Say the Darndest Things.
Right.
Way back in the day.
That is true.
And I think you found in raising your own kids, you probably enjoyed those aha moments with the 3 that you raised, right? That was probably an amazing experience for you.
I was going to say it is, but I have to see if I can backtrack just a smidge.
Yeah.
When I kind of got into the band thing when my kids were little, as much as family was a huge dynamic for me, once I got into the music and once we got into the really popular, the really known around the area, because we traveled pretty much the whole UP, northern Wisconsin, stuff like that. We were all over the place. Music consumed so much of my time and being out there. And as much as I hate to admit it, or as much as I guess I'm ashamed to admit it, there was a lot of times my kids raised themselves for a few years.
This was before you decided to sell the equipment. This was kind of what pushed you into selling the equipment and settling down, or how did that?
Oh, no, that was actually after.
Okay, so you started playing again. You picked up again and started playing.
That's when. Okay. Yep. That was when I bought the house and I found the acoustic guitar in the closet.
Okay.
That started everything all over again. That started the itch.
Well, so how did you find your bandmates? Were they friends at that point, or did you kind of start the whole process over again, hunting for people to play with?
Kind of started the whole process over again. I kind of reconnected with my brother because he had pretty much never stopped playing.
Mm. And you guys still lived in the same town at that point, right? Because you've always lived in
yes, we did.
In Michigan till recently.
Yeah, we did. And so being that he never stopped playing, he had all of these music connections. He knew who was playing, who was available, who we could pick up. And we did, as I guess as horrible as it sounds, we had gone to listen to a couple different bands and kind of, I don't want to say headhunting per se, but we would go and kind of pressure some of the members of those bands to come join us.
Sure.
And it worked.
Yeah. Well, I think you hear that in a lot of popular band groups that form. Sometimes you don't always get lucky off the first session. You got to find that match and that mesh. So then you started playing out a lot again, and that kind of took you away from the family, is what you're saying. And you weren't around as much with the kids. So that must have been difficult on the relationship with the missus at that point. And you
was.
And the kids. How did that work? What happened?
Well, as much of a cool factor as it was that, that we were playing out, that we were popular, this and that, it did take its toll on the family. It took its toll pretty hard, actually. We ended up, because of it, a very leading contribution to ending up divorced from her was the music, was the band, was the time away, was the, while I was playing and she was partying and I was partying, and instead of growing together at that point, we kind of grew apart.
Sure. That must have been really hard, especially coming from a home with two solid parents and that sense of never giving up that your parents kind of given you.
Right.
What was that like for a little while? What was that transition? What kind of things did you go through, if I can ask?
It was tough. I was married for 17 years.
Yeah. So you're how old at this point when you got the divorce?
Let's see, that was 30, I think it was 35-ish.
Were you in the middle of school, or where was that in the school scheme of things?
That would have been right around my last year of school.
And I know not only your last year did you go through a divorce, but you also lost your father.
I did. In September of my last year of college, my dad was involved in a motorcycle accident, and he died, which made the last year pretty brutal. I had wanted to take the time off from school. I had wanted to separate myself and kind of recoup and kind of regroup my thoughts and make sure everything was done with him. It was one of those, even though I have older brother, younger sister, they both, I don't want to say aren't very level, took it really hard and they weren't thinking straight. And nobody really was stepping up to make sure that all of my dad's affairs were in order and everything was taken care of. And I kind of jumped into that role. And with doing that, I wanted to leave school for a while so I could make sure all of that was taken care of.
Right.
I was very fortunate that my instructors and my professors at school knew me well enough, and they wouldn't let me take that time off. They wouldn't let me walk away. They assured me that I could take whatever time I needed. They would work with me. They would make sure that I had the assignments and I was able to do the work and I could turn it in when it was convenient for me, and they wouldn't fail me because of, the underlying circumstances.
Sure.
I think they knew as well as I did that had I taken that time off, I probably never would have gone back. Right.
It's amazing that you had such great instructors. What college were you going to at the time?
It was Finlandia University in Hancock.
Okay. Michigan.
A little private school.
Sure. If any of your instructors are listening, that encouragement and that cooperation and that understanding that they showed you changed your life at that point. Am I right?
Oh, it did. Absolutely. If I hadn't finished, there's no telling where I would be right now.
Yeah.
Because even my wife pretty much threw me out. The only thing I had was the clothes on my back and my motorcycle, and I had no place to go. At that time, finishing college, I was working a part-time job at another convenience store gas station. That seems to be a common theme of mine, apparently. And I was only working like 20 hours a week. I really had no money to my name and just a motorcycle and clothes on my back.
Right.
Luckily, my family had a camp several miles more north of where we originally were anyway. No power, no running water. I ended up living out there for quite a while because I had no place else to go. I had to make that tough choice of I could either afford to rent an apartment or I could eat.
Right.
There was no both.
Well, and being in Michigan, it's cold up there. We're cold here in Sheboygan, but you're obviously several hours north. Were you in a tent or a cabin?
It was a cabin.
Oh, okay. Well, at least you had a roof over your head, and you're fortunate in that aspect.
Helped.
Wood burning stove, and just kind of focusing on school at that point.
Yep, and kind of rebuilding my life and trying to get things back in order.
Yeah.
And it was around that time when I ended up with my now wife.
Well, that's great. So you get done with school, you're struggling for a while, you met your new wife. How's life starting to develop at that point for you?
It's starting to look pretty good at that point. Although it was one of those, as when I first got into school, everybody told me, they said, oh, this is the ultimate time. By the time you graduate, you're going to have all these old teachers are going to be ready to retire and you'll be able to just step right in and you'll be set. Well, during the 4 years that I was in college, not really a recession, but the economy downturned enough that a lot of these old teachers that were set to retire determined they couldn't afford to retire. So nobody left the teaching field. So I get out and there is no teaching jobs. I subbed for a little while, but that wasn't steady enough that I could survive on.
What year is this?
Actually, this was 2006.
Okay. Yeah, right as that recession was hitting us. So I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, that's quite right. I left that entirely. Actually, for about 4 years, I left. I had nothing to do with school. I ended up just getting, found another job at a wholesaler that I was a salesman and delivery person at there. And that would, I did that for a few years until I realized that I needed to get back out into the schools. I needed to fulfill what I set out to do.
Mm-hmm. So graduated without a degree, or with a degree that you can't use due to the economy and the circumstances, filling in, doing odd jobs until you can find something back within your field. When did you finally get lucky enough to find a school that you first got into, and where was it?
That was my first spot was actually out at E.B. Holman School, a little itty-bitty tiny school out in the middle of the woods. It was a K-8 school. There was 175 students, K-8. It was that small.
Sure.
And I was hired on as the 5th grade teacher.
Okay. And how long were you out there?
That was 2 years, it's about 2.5 before I moved here.
Okay. So during that time, you ended up with a granddaughter with special needs, and you and your new wife are now. Did you adopt her, or are you? How does that work, if I can ask?
We are actually legal guardians of her.
Okay.
We got her when she was 11 months old.
Okay. Can I ask the circumstances around that? Is there anything you'd like to share?
As far as us getting her?
Sure, yeah.
Well, her mother and her dad at the time, they had been living with us because they were both very young. They were like 18, 19-ish, 18, I think, when Madeline was born. And with the complications, with the medical needs that she had, even though they were with us, that was a lot on them. The doctor's
Absolutely.
appointments, the trips, the medical equipment, everything was. that's hard on an 18-year-old young family.
Right.
They went the route, unfortunately, they turned to prescription pills.
Mm-hmm.
And, they went kind of down a sour road, basically.
Sure.
And because of that, we ended up with metal.
Which was the best thing, completely understandable. And that touched your hearts because at that point you were just a regular teacher, but then you kind of curved your teaching degree into special needs. Can you tell us about that process and how was it taking care of a newborn with special needs at that point in your life?
Well, I'm not sure that I was prepared for it, even at that point. She currently sees 19 different specialists at Children's. And, we were making a dozen trips or so from the UP to Children's every year. In one year, we had, I think it was 8 emergency life flights for her.
What's her diagnosis, if I can ask?
Well, she's got kind of a laundry list. She has Dandy Walker malformation, which is basically she has absolutely no cerebellum, which realistically she shouldn't be alive with no. That controls a good portion of your bodily functions.
Mm-hmm.
She has Turner syndrome, which is primarily a girl-dominated. I don't want to say disease, but
it affects more women than men.
Yes.
Sure.
She is completely tube-fed. She takes absolutely nothing by mouth. She wears a backpack all day long with a feeding pump and her formula and stuff that feeds her into her intestines. She is blind in her left eye. We're not sure what she can see out of her right eye. She is adrenal insufficient. She takes steroids every day to regulate her cortisol. I'm trying to think. She is not so much anymore, but she was kind of hypoglycemic for a while. We had to regulate her sugar intake. We had a couple crashes on that landed us inpatient with her as well. It's been kind of a twisty road.
Sure, I can imagine. How has that shaped you? Obviously, I know your heart grew bigger because I've seen it. What were the first few years like, and what's the journey with that been like for you?
Well, the first few years were pretty rough, to the point that it wasn't that long after my wife and I had got married that we ended up with this little girl and a relatively new marriage. All of this thrown on us and really not knowing what to do or what to expect. It took its toll. It was hard. We went through some pretty rocky times. We went through some very financial difficulties at this point because of the amount of trips that we were making to Children's and all of the med flights and trying to stay in Milwaukee with her. And that kind of led up to, some of where we're at today.
Sure.
Had it not been for the kindness of complete strangers at certain points, we had gotten to the point with the med flights and all of the doctor visits and all of the trips back and forth to Milwaukee. We had fallen so far behind on our mortgage that we stood a really good chance of losing our house. And out of nowhere, this stranger, I get a little emotional.
It's all right. Take your time.
Comes up and makes sure that we had enough money to pay our mortgage, that we wouldn't lose our house.
Just an angel out of
huge.
nowhere. Yeah, for sure.
Somebody we had no clue who it was, or they had really nothing that they would gain from doing this, because there was no way at this point that we could pay them back.
Right.
And that didn't stop them. They didn't care.
Yeah.
They just wanted help.
That's amazing. So this angel came in, saved the situation. What happened from there?
that was around the time we stayed up there for a little while longer, till it just got to the point that that's when a couple other diagnoses had come in. That's when the adrenal insufficiency had started to show up, and other more pressing, more life-threatening diagnoses had come in.
Right.
And we determined that we had to be closer to children. We had to. We had figured we could live anywhere within an hour of children and be safe and comfortable. So a couple of the trips that we had made to Milwaukee after being released and stuff, we would spend the day riding around within an hour of Milwaukee trying to figure out, okay, where did we want to live? Where would we like to end up? We knew it had to be someplace by water, because coming from the UP, where every place you go is a beach, we needed the beach.
Right.
And we ended up in Sheboygan.
It's a beautiful, beautiful town. Anybody that hasn't been to Sheboygan, Wisconsin, it's right on Lake Michigan and has just the most beautiful lakefront. People drive from all over just to come to the beaches here. And I also live in Sheboygan and feel darn lucky to have moved here. I'm originally from Madison myself. So it is beyond words to try to put myself in your shoes and understand what that period of time must have been like for you. Trying to save, your granddaughter's life and keep her alive, and you're struggling with the financial pressures, and this angel comes through, and so this weight's been lifted, and then you had the ability to find a home here in Sheboygan close to Children's Hospital. And when you came here, what was that like for you? Were you greeted with open arms? Was it hard to meet people? Because things started to develop for you.
Extremely difficult to meet people, because with having Madeline at home, we don't get out. We can't, somebody always has to be with her.
Right.
So we can't just go hang out with friends, or we can't meet people that way. When we moved here, neither one of us had jobs. We knew absolutely nobody in town. It was just us. But we figured, even though we had family and stuff up in the UP, once we got Madeline, I think she kind of scared everybody away, and we were on our own anyway. So we figured if we were going to be alone, we were going to be alone in a place where we were closer to the hospital.
That must have been really hard coming from your background. I didn't expect to hear that part.
Right. It was very difficult. We always looked at it, I guess the way that we were able to process it and kind of make sense of it was our life stopped, essentially. Nobody else's did. And we didn't expect anybody's to, so I guess, we looked at it that way going, their life still has to go on, and this is what we need to do. It's not necessarily where we thought we would be, but it's where we needed to be.
Right. And was it successful moving down here? Did things start to stabilize for your granddaughter? And what is her name, please?
Oh, Madeline.
Madeline. And I didn't catch your wife's name either. I'm sorry for our listeners.
Oh, my granddaughter's name is Madeline.
Yep, and the new wife that you're with. I'm sorry, I didn't catch her name.
Kathleen.
Kathleen. Just for our listeners.
That's kind of,
yeah.
Okay, that's kind of cool. She was actually my high school crush.
Oh, how unique.
But I was always too shy in high school, because I was that outcast, long hair, leather jacket. I was the bum dude. Well, she was the cheerleader. She was she was one of those. And I could never approach her. And so it was like, I don't know, just amazing.
It's funny how life works. And in the course of yours, you've had at least one angel that's helped. Have you seen others that have helped influence? I know there's some staff members that perhaps also have really...
Well, we did have at one point too, shortly before we moved from the UP, my vehicle was stolen and burnt by a group of teenagers. And the story ended up in the paper. And there was a gentleman from up there, and this one's a little tough too. He calls me. He says, "Scott," he says, "you don't know me." He says, "but I'm in a position I think I can help you." He said, I saw your article in the paper. I saw what happened to you and your family. He says, and I'm sorry that there are people in this world that did that to you. And he said, but I think I can help you. He says, I got a car I want to give you. I'm like, okay. And he tells me, he says, I've got a 2002 Cadillac DeVille. He says, I want to give you this car. And my first thought, was thinking, okay, cool, this guy wants to give me a car. But then I'm thinking too, okay, if somebody's going to give you a car, chances are pretty good, what kind of shape is this car in? Is it on its last legs? Is it, pretty beat up and it's just sitting around, whatever? And it worked out that he called me. And the day after my vehicle was stolen and burnt, Madeline ended up flighted to Milwaukee. So Kathy and Madeline were in Milwaukee, and I was still at home. I was getting ready to leave when this guy called. And so I explained to him, I said, I'm getting ready to head to Milwaukee right now. Can I call you back on Monday or Tuesday when I get back into town? He said, no problem. He said, it'll still be here. Let me know when you come back in. So I go down there and I explain to Kathy, that this guy wants to give us a car. And she's kind of skeptical, much like I was. I get back into town. I think it was Monday or Tuesday the following week. And I guess for giggles, I give this guy a call. I'm like, what can it hurt to reach out to him? So I set up, I had a buddy of mine bring me out to look at this car. He opens his garage door, and it is a 2002 Cadillac DeVille. All black, white leather interior. There's not a speck of rust. There's not a scratch. There's not a dent. I mean, this car looked, other than dust from sitting in this guy's garage for a little while, was showroom condition. This car was absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to this guy, and it's going to say, I can't accept this. You can't just give me a car. And he interrupted me. He said, let me ask you something. I said, okay, what is that? He said, will this car help you and your family? And I said, well, yeah, no, unquestionable. He pulled the title out of his back pocket, slapped it on the roof, signed his name, handed me the title. He said, there you go, it's your car.
It's amazing. There's times in life where, it's really hard to accept the kindness of strangers.
Right.
And I hear that in you, how deep it touched you. That must have been just an amazing experience between that and the mortgage. When you look back, you start to see these angels. A lot of us in the stories that I've had from my guests have had certain people that have come along at the right time, offered the right guidance, the right help, the right assistance, if you will. But it only comes to those that are really pursuing. I find that if you pursue your dreams and it's followed by initiative and you just follow your heart and do the right things, that doors seem to open up and those opportunities seem to happen. And for you, you gave up a dream to raise a family, which was another dream, to then get back into the old dream, which I think you learned some lessons from, but it also knocked you into the path that you're on now, which is life's way of keeping you in the path or lane that you need to stay in. And for you, it was starting out with teaching. And it's funny because a lot of the teachers that I've met end up teaching in ways that they never dreamed that they would be doing. And in your particular situation, you're teaching by example. And when you came to Sheboygan, you got things set up for yourself, you got stable, but then you had a focus on paying it forward and kind of blessing others like you'd been blessed. How did that dream start for you?
Well, being a teacher, we're by no means well off, but we are in a position that we feel that we could help some people, that we could reach out and we could kind of return the favor. We could, in a sense, pay it forward some. And so I was sitting around middle of December, and it had been rolling around my mind for quite some time. What is something that we can do? How can we help? We're in a much larger area than I'm used to. Realistically, I still don't know a whole lot of people. But there has to be something that we can do, something that can help some people. So randomly, I created this group on Facebook.
But
the
this was
area paid forward group.
1 second. But this was laid on your heart for a reason. Was it because of all of this assistance and this help and this history that you've shared with this or with us that perpetuated this for you and gave you this desire that? Because nobody usually just starts up in the middle of nowhere and says, you know what, I want to do this. I'm going to start a pay it forward group within my area and try to give back. For you, hearing your story, I can only help but think that must have really laid this on your heart. Is that what it was, or where did this come from? Because that was an amazing thing that you started.
That was definitely where this all stemmed from. Being that people had stepped up, people who didn't know me, didn't know anything about me, were willing to step up and help when they didn't have to, when they knew that there was probably nothing that I could ever do to repay them or to make it up to them, or it didn't stop them. They took that step and they helped us without question, without judgment, without question, and did that. And that really hits a chord, that really sits in your heart for a long time. You don't ever forget that stuff.
Right. I've been a big fan of pay it forward. I've been hashtagging that phrase for a long time. I've had angels that have come in my life and helped me at times that I needed it. And life has definitely nudged me into the lane that I needed to be on. It's amazing, the journey, and as we look back, how that unfolds and the things that it teaches us.
Right.
So how did you get into special needs teaching? I want to focus just a little bit on just the cusp of getting into the Pay It Forward group, and then we'll spend enough time focusing on that. But you obviously were teaching, and you were spending all this time with Madeline, your granddaughter. The things that you were learning at home, you found that you could transfer over into helping special needs at school, or did she get of age where she started school and this was a way to still kind of help and be with her during the day?
I only recently, since I moved here, got my special ed license. It was after I got hired on at Horace Mann Middle School, and that's when I went in for my special ed license. And it was because of knowing, what we were doing with Madeline and things that I never thought that I could do, or that were within my scope of who I was, caring for a special needs child, working with special needs, working with cognitive disabilities, I didn't think that was even a part of who I was until we got Madeline. And then, as she started growing and she started becoming a bit more healthy and she was prospering and, and I was thinking, I can do something with this. I like this. I like this population. So I went in and I got my special ed license through a program out of Oshkosh. And that kind of put me where I'm at now, teaching the intellectually disabled at Horace Mann.
It's amazing. And I think you feel like you're in the right lane. You found your spot finally. Isn't that kind of where you're at right now?
Very much so. Yeah. Very much. This is it.
It's amazing when you finally find that, or you find yourself in that zone, how you feel the harmony, you feel the reinforcement that life is just, this is where I'm meant to be. And I think that's where you're at right now. And it must be reinforcing as you started getting stable and you started working at Horace and getting some of these pillars underneath yourself to get stability for the family and for your life again. You got into a position where you wanted to give back, and you started Sheboygan Area Pay It Forward on Facebook, which is a group for the Sheboygan area community that in a really short period of time has grown to over 1,700 members. Tell us about that journey. How did that idea develop, and what started with that?
Well, that's what, I said, when somebody does those kind of deeds for you, or somebody steps up, that's when it really, really hits your heart. And you don't forget those things. And I was always trying to think of ways that we could help somebody, that we could do something to return the favor, or to help somebody that maybe was in our situation, or, pay it forward somehow.
Right.
And so it had been rolling around my mind probably for years previously, but it really came to fruition, I guess, at kind of beginning of December. Holidays always bring that out. You're like, what else can I do? What can I do to help somebody? And
absolutely,
I suppose this was really no different. So around the middle of December is when I was watching TV, and I'm like, I'm just going to put this out there. I'm going to start this group. I have no idea what it's going to do, if it's going to take off, because I'm still, for all intents and purposes, in a place that nobody knows that I exist other than my coworkers and maybe the families of the students that I teach, and nobody has any clue who I am.
Right.
But I figured I'm going to put this out there. Maybe I can help somebody. Maybe I can reach somebody. So I put it out there, and Kathy was in doing homework or whatever it was she was doing, and I put it out there, and I came in and I told her, well, I just did a thing that I might need your help with. And of course, typical wife fashion, she goes, what did you do now?
Mm-hmm.
So I told her, I created a Facebook page, a group, a Pay It Forward group. And I said, this is what I want to do with it. This is kind of my ideas. This is where I would like it to go. And she said, okay, she's very supportive and backs me on my harebrained ideas. And it started to just blow up. Members started pouring in, and
first week, how many members did you get?
Within 24 hours, we had about 100 people. Within the week, we had like 400. Now, 2 months in, we have like 1,700.
Yeah, exactly. It's a community tie that we all share, or at least a lot of us do. There's like-minded people, and we want to be able to help. I think your Sheboygan Area Pay It Forward says it best. No one can help everyone, but everyone can help someone. And we can't change the world, but together we can. And that's the message that it says to me. And that's the message that I've been trying to say and spread forward for a long time myself. It's the butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings and other side of the continent, and you get a hurricane on this side. And right now we're all flapping our wings and creating a community spirit in a time when life seems the darkest. This last year, at least, especially with COVID and the political arena and all this other crap that we're seeing, it's affected us mentally as a community, as a people, and having a group that people can be a part of to not help everyone at the same time, but in a way we are. It's helping who we can, but together in a community way, we make a bigger impact. And you started out doing this independently by yourself. How did this start for you? You started with just a few packages of hats, gloves, scarves. What were the first steps for you?
Well, we actually, I don't honestly think I had any clue as to what I was doing or how I was going to navigate it. I guess I didn't know what to expect. I knew that somewhere along the line somebody would jump in that I could help. Mm-hmm. And we started working with, initially, I put it out there, and we're kind of letting the need dictate where it goes, at least right now, until we get, I guess, more of a foundation of our next steps.
Sure.
But I was sitting out, and I got a phone call from a woman that was on the page and told me that she had ran into a couple that was living in their car up in the parking lot of Northside Piggly Wiggly. And this was, I don't know, 10:30 at night, whatever, probably about, I think it was a Tuesday. I think this was Friday night that she had called me, or Thursday night, because I had to get up for work the next morning. She called me, she said, and this is, middle of December, it's cold.
Right.
And she says, there's a young couple living in a car up Northside Piggly Wiggly. And she was telling me, she described the car. She described the couple that to me and stuff. And I talked to her for a little while. I hung up the phone, and I sat there. I was kind of quiet, and looked at Kathy. I said, "All right, we need blankets. I need jackets. I need food. I need whatever we can do." So this was, like I said, she called me 10:30 at night. This was probably around 11 o'clock or so. I'm getting out of my night clothes to go get dressed and go meet this family to go see what I can do to help them out. Met them, brought them some jackets, some blankets, some whatever else we could. Next thing you know, I'm at McDonald's drive-thru. I'm getting them some hot food. Coming back from McDonald's, phone rings. It's the wife. She says, "You got the credit card on you?" I'm like, "Yeah." She says, "Put them up in a hotel." I was like, "Okay." So I went back. I brought them their food. And I explained to them, I said, and they're very appreciative, very incredible young couple. And very thankful, that I brought them food. And I told them, I said, tell you what, I said, we're going to do another step beyond this. I said, we're going to put you up in a hotel for the night, get you out of this cold. It's too cold to be in your car. You can't, I couldn't leave knowing that somebody was still sleeping in their car on a cold night like that.
Right.
By the time I get to the hotel, Kathy calls again. Says, make it 2 nights. I'm like, all right, so put them 2 nights. Through generosity and through reaching out on this page, we actually kept them in this hotel for like 2 weeks.
Wow.
Through donations of people that had no idea who this couple was, or for that matter, who we were. But yet they found it within themselves to donate and to help these people out. And that really kind of, it made it grow. And seeing the community coming together to help out people they didn't know.
Yeah.
I guess, we did. I kind of thought at that point that we may have something here. This may actually work.
And one of the first thoughts that came through your head is, with this cold, providing warmth. And even though we can't provide a roof for everyone right now, we can provide some instance of warmth. And your idea that started out was hats, gloves, and scarves, correct?
Yeah, then we started out with the hats, gloves, and scarves. I told Kathy, I said, I want to make a hat tree someplace that we can hang hats on it. It was just going to be a simple little, we were going to find like one tree somewhere in town, and we were just going to hang some hats on it with a peace sign and hope that, somebody might need a hat. So we put a post out on the page, asking for donations on hats or mittens or scarves or whatever we could do. And it grew exponentially. It seems like we blinked, and it was huge. We had actually the Sheboygan Food Pantry had contacted us at this point, and they had donated us 400 hats.
Wow. All
hand knit, all beautiful, unbelievable hats, mittens, scarves, stuff like that. And then they just started pouring out. One of the very first pictures that I put out on the page regarding the hats and stuff, I had this little cardboard box, probably 15 inches by 15 inches by maybe 20 inches tall, that had, maybe 6-8 hats or something in the bottom. And I was so proud because it was starting.
Yeah.
And I put that post out there, that the hat box is starting. This is a good thing that you have hats. We need hats, we need mittens. Before I know it, we have a pile in our living room floor that's probably 15 feet across and 3 feet high. Just unbelievable. And it grew to wherever we could put them in town, bus stops, high traffic areas, low income neighborhoods.
Yeah.
wherever we thought that the most need would be.
So it started out with seeds, and they're starting to sprout, and in a way that was unanticipated but yet welcome, and kind of crazy, because your group's been up for a little over 2 months, or about 2 months, and you already have 1,700 members. You were recently on the news for Milwaukee as well as the Sheboygan Press, and everybody is grabbing on to this pay it forward theme. Right now is some of the worst times that we've seen, and it's always the worst before it gets better. And so I'm hoping that we'll see a better ending to 2021. But right now is a time when families are hurting. COVID, our economy is in the toilet. People are struggling. And this is a way to give back. And again, those are seeds. It started with the hats, gloves, scarves, and it's grown now to even bigger ideas and bigger aspirations. Why don't you talk about that?
Our next step in this process, we've already started our nonprofit organization status, and we've started filing for our tax ID. We are working on a project that is lovingly called The Road to Home, where we take somebody that's maybe out on the streets, or somebody that's maybe Salvation Army or not doing so hot. We don't judge. I don't question. It's not my place to know why they ended up where they did or how they ended up there. And get them into our Road to Home program, which is transitional housing. Get them off the streets, get them into this housing. My wife is an accountant by trade. She's a certified health coach. She's in the process now of becoming a certified life coach. And we want to take these families that we're working with, and we want to help them along the process, get them off of the street, get them into this transitional housing, give them the skill sets, budgeting, life skills, stuff that maybe they don't have. We found out a lot through this. There's a lot of cracks. There's a lot of gaps in our system that these people fall into.
Yeah.
And everybody's quick to tell them what they're doing wrong and what they need to do, but nobody takes the time to show them how to do it or what steps they need to do to fix it. They're just saying, well, you need to do this and you need to do that, but nobody shows them how.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we want to step in. We want to be that go-between. We want to be able to help them with those skills.
And in doing so, filling some of the crack that exists in the system.
Yes.
It's that crack that people fall into, and there's no net, and it's a perpetual area where there's no help. There's nothing that you can do. Half the people step over you and tell you to get it together, bum. It's
right.
It's sad and disheartening. And when you're stuck in that situation, most likely you deal with depression, anxiety, and a whole host of mental illnesses or mental fatigue at the very least anyways, because of the duresses that you're under. I think that this is going to be a really good thing for our community, and hopefully it could be a template for other communities within other states and throughout our state, because no one can help everyone, but everyone can help someone. And the more groups like Sheboygan Area Pay It Forward, the more impacts those are going to have on communities. And I think this is really great. I've been pushing Pay It Forward for so long, and we're all pieces of the cog, if you will. And right now, your group is grown to over 1,700 members. This is a little bit crazy for you, especially with someone that doesn't have that kind of background to really know what to do or where to reach out. And fortunately, we've been able to have some people in the community and kind of offer some help. Where are the biggest areas right now that members of Sheboygan area Pay It Forward can contribute not only on donations, but also perhaps on organizational structure. I know you need volunteers. Many hands make light work. A lot of this you and Kathleen have been doing just yourselves. Where can we start to get you assistance, and what areas would you like to start with?
Well, I wish I had a solid answer on that one. We're still kind of learning as we go. As I mentioned earlier, we're letting the need dictate our direction right now.
Sure.
And we have this kind of running joke that it's working so well because we don't know what we're doing. And, we've noticed, too, that a lot of the programs that are out there and a lot of the things that are designed to help people, they're so cumbersome and so overthought that they're not even, most people, they don't want to jump through all of the hoops to have that happen. There's 10 pages of paperwork that you have to do just to get one little bit of assistance. And right now we don't have any of that. And that might be a good thing, might be a bad thing.
So maybe if there's any listeners that maybe are experienced in charity work, perhaps they're familiar with some of these forms or this process, that would be more than welcome if they were to reach out and perhaps offer a little assistance. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, that would be huge.
What other kind of things? What do we need to get this together? We have 1,700 members in our group, which I'm part of. What can we do together cooperatively as this continues to grow? Let's reach out to our members. This is a private group, and as our listeners listen to this, what types of things and what types of people do you need? What's number one?
The number one thing to move this forward, we need to secure funding somehow to pick up like a duplex house.
Okay.
That's not something that on a teacher's salary that I have laying around, or that's even an option for Kathy and myself to be able to pull out of a hat,
And some of the funding that you're trying to get through the government right now, or the assistance, would help to obtain this. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So then,
and I have reached out,
sure,
to a few people, like for grant writing and stuff like that, because that, again, this isn't really an avenue that maybe 10 years ago that I had seen myself going down. Mm-hmm. So neither one of us have any kind of experience with grant writing or any kind of experience with where the funding comes from, who to reach out to for the funding, how any of this takes place. So I have reached out to a few different people that have kind of stepped up and are, nobody stepped forward and helped and has offered to help us write grants yet, but they keep saying, well, I have connections with people that can do this, and we can get you in touch, and I'm kind of hoping that falls into place nicely so we can get this next step rolling.
Right. Well, and hopefully this platform will try to get that message out. I think that you just have to keep turning over rocks until you find what you need. And unfortunately, due to this particular niche or this particular crack in our system, it's difficult, and they don't make it easy. But together, we can get it done. And with 1,700 members, I am a true believer in the 6 degrees of separation. You know what that is?
Yeah, I do. I am too.
So as we put this out into the ether, and as our members listen to this, and as our listeners listen to this, I'll be putting a link in the description for this podcast to get a hold of Scott LaBonte to offer any assistance, both donations, maybe assistance with extra hands, with the Pay It Forward projects that he's putting together. But more importantly, if you want to be a part of this movement and you want to reach out and perhaps offer some assistance with just getting this off the ground, we would be more than appreciative of you reaching out via the link for Scott or Kathleen and following up with them at that point. Anything that I haven't covered yet, Scott? I think the future for this, we're looking at transitional housing, and we're trying to obtain that through government grants and assistance. We have many projects that you're putting together, and some of them are smaller than others, if you will, in terms of the scope of things. But what you're doing is what you can do right now, and you're striving to do more, which I think is admirable. And all of us that are listening, all of us that are part of this Pay It Forward movement, we are part of this because we want to give what we can. And this is a great way for us to combine our efforts together and really make some big impacts within the Sheboygan area. So, Scott, I thank you for sharing your journey. I think we got pretty personal there, and it was difficult. But at the same time, I think it made us connect with you even more and understand your background and why we want to support you with your movement. And what you and Kathleen are doing is it's making ripples, it's affecting lives, and there's not a better thing that any one of us can do than that. And I thank you for that.
I thank you very much for having me on and giving me this opportunity to share our story and to get it out there and to let people know that there are people that are willing to help and we're here.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I know that you've also been doing some acoustic sets, both on Facebook as well as in the community. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that, and how can we find you when you're either on Facebook or playing out next?
Well, I'm doing a Facebook Live show on Friday evening at 6 p.m. Actually, I just put the event out on Facebook probably about an hour or so ago.
That's great.
I try to do one a week. I've been doing this since we started the lockdown last spring. It was one of those, my way, I guess, of trying to alleviate the stress and the chaos of everyday life. I figured the least I could do is I could put some music out there. I could, hopefully people would forget about everything that's going on around them for an hour while they sat and listened to some music. And it started really small, much the same thing. A couple people jumped on here and there, very, very sporadic. And it's growing steadily. It's growing. My audience is steadily growing, and it's nice. I get to connect with these people, and we laugh and we joke, and I have my laptop set up on side of me so I can read everybody's comments as I'm playing it, and we're talking back and forth, and it's nice to just kind of sit and unwind and just forget about everything for even an hour.
Yeah.
And just lose yourself in the music.
Yeah. How do we find you? Or do they have to be a Facebook friend to watch that? Do they have to be on the private group for Sheboygan area Pay It Forward? How can...
No, that is public. That is on my personal Facebook page. And it's always public. Anybody can find me on Facebook. I have all my settings are set to public. I'm very easy to find. Just click my personal profile and it comes up.
Yeah. So that's Scott, SCOTT, LaBonte. I'll spell that for our listeners. It's LABONTE on Facebook.com. And that'll be in the Sheboygan area. So, Scott, your journey has been amazing. Tell us before we go, how is Madeline doing? Has all of this really helped, being closer to children's, more access? I'm hoping anyways that you're going to say she's doing much better and things are stable and she's doing good.
She is doing, I can honestly say she's doing amazing.
That's so
She is
great.
The most wonderful little girl you could imagine. Her personality, her spirit, her bigger than life.
Makes it all worth it at the end of the day, doesn't
it? It does.
It's amazing.
When I walk in from work and she greets me at the door and then she gives me those big old hugs and she squeals when I walk in. That's it. That's what it's about.
Yep. Scott, thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your story. listeners, again, if you want to find Scott, the Sheboygan Area Pay It Forward group on Facebook is how you can find his group. Otherwise, you can find Scott on Facebook at Scott LaBonte in Sheboygan area, Wisconsin. You and Kathleen are really setting examples for a lot of people, and it's inspiring. It was a match on some gas.
This has been Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany, exploring
really
deep stories from real-life guests with real-life experiences, providing insight to our listeners with every story. Stay up to date on future podcasts by bookmarking Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany.podbean.com and follow Bo on social media by searching Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. Have an idea for a future story? Send your idea to acrmadison@gmail.com. Until next time, grab life by the horns and keep inspiring others.
Obviously, through your experiences, that other side of the coin has perpetuated to do what you're doing now. And, it's this community spirit that's going to get us through this time. And give your wife a hug, and anything that I can do to be of assistance, please reach out. And I look forward to great things for 2021 from you, Scott. You guys have a great day, okay?
Thank you. You too. And thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. We'll talk to you later. Bye now.